I was waiting outside for the Handy Dart bus today outside a mall, and there were three seats on a bench. And I took one of them, and then there was a boy with his father. The boy sat down, so we were on either end, and the middle seat was available. I wasn't sure if the father was going to sit down, but he chose not to, so that seat was free for a while. And this woman, older woman, I would say she was at least close to 70, if I'm pretty sure she was. She was taking a walker and she was walking really slowly, kind of hunched over. She looked over at the bench that we were sitting at and she stopped a little bit and she said, well, no, she didn't say anything. I said, oh, do you want to sit down? I thought maybe even though there's like a free seat, maybe she thought because it was between us that it wasn't available. And you know what she said to me? You'll never guess. She said, do you not think that I have a brain? If I wanted to sit down, I would sit down. What's wrong with you people? And I was so shocked. I was so confused. And the father of this boy looked at me like, what's wrong with her? And as she walked away, I felt myself split into two people. One of them was the old me, and one of them was the now me. And the old me was going to rant and rage and feel so stupid and so bad and feel angry that why did this woman react the way that she did. The now me, she started laughing. I mean, I started laughing. And I said, wow, I did not expect that. And another part of me, that same now me, almost wanted to high five this woman and felt kind of proud of her. And I was like, which one of me is me right now? Which one is the right reaction? Why are there two split energies here for me? And then I smiled because I thought, I'm growing up. Like, I'm letting go of trying to control the situation, take it personally, feel like I have to find out why this woman was so rude to me. No, I just let it go. And the thing that lingered with me a little bit was, good for you, woman. Her, I mean, for standing up for, like, I felt like she was trying to say, like, just because I'm older doesn't mean I'm stupid. And it really made me think, like, of course, she could have handled that way better than she did. But maybe I wouldn't have gotten the point if she had tried to explain or try to just be nice to make me feel good or whatever. It was shocking to me, but maybe I needed that shock. And then when I got into a taxi for a separate ride, the taxi driver was telling me that he gets so many different types of customers in his taxi. They're all different races, ages, and he says that he really likes being a taxi driver, but the part that can be hard is the night driving, being a driver at night, because sometimes if people are drunk and they get into the cab, you don't know whether they're actually going to pay for it. And he told me about a couple of rides where he drove a long way and the fare on the taxi like was actually about $80 at least, to go that distance. And it wasn't until he arrived at that place that the person who took the taxi couldn't pay and just either admitted that they couldn't pay or refused to pay, or and he said, like, I'm not going to get into an argument with them. He wants to be safe, and what can he really do? And he said, like, if I call the police, like, then I have to spend an hour dealing with the police, and sometimes they can't do anything about it. But he was saying that sometimes it's just a matter of whether you can read the person well. And he said, sometimes I think that I'm I read people really well, and sometimes I'm wrong. And he was saying, like, there was this woman, she looked very well put together, she looked very attractive, she also spoke very well and was very respectful, and they had a great conversation going there. And he just made this assumption, because if he has doubts about whether people can pay, he's allowed to ask them to pay beforehand, especially if he knows it's a really long trip. But he said, I have to gauge what each person makes me feel like. Are they going to live up to paying, or are they not? And he said, I thought that my gauge was right with her, and I didn't ask her beforehand. And then when they got to the place, which was really far, she said, what happens if I don't pay? And he was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, I don't have the money. And then he didn't want to argue about it, and he left it alone. But he told me this story about another guy who had these many tattoos on his arms and stuff. He looked rough around the edges. He, could have been mistaken for someone that wouldn't have owned up to paying for a cab ride, or that he was like kind of irresponsible or whatever. And he said that this person in his cab and him had such a great conversation, and they were really getting along so well that when the cab driver drove this person to their destination, and it was really far, the person in the cab said to the cab driver, wait here, I want some of my friends to meet you. He introduced him to his girlfriend and his friends, and he said, you should come inside. You're such a cool cab driver. Like, we would love to have you in here. And the cab driver said, oh no, it's fine. And, even if he was done his shift, he said, I don't drink. And so the guy who was in the cab said, well, if you don't drink, then here's something else for you. And basically, the guy who looked as if he would be the person that would maybe flake on the paying of the cab and not be responsible, ended up paying the cab driver not just the amount that he owed him plus a tip, but he doubled the amount. And then when the girlfriend and the friend came out, they heard about this cab driver, and they were so excited that he was such a great driver and got his friend there safely, and they wanted to do something for him. And they said, well, we know that you don't drink, so here's a little bit more. And the friend gave him an extra $50 on top of it. And we were just kind of reflecting on how sometimes you just don't know. I mean, you think you know, but you don't know. And it's funny because in the first situation with the older woman, I would have assumed that she would have been really sweet about whether she wanted to sit or not. And I made a lot of assumptions that she wasn't able to keep walking, and, that she needed someone to speak to her kindly. And she threw back at me like not much kindness. But then I also shocked myself, because instead of getting angry and upset about it, I reacted by laughing and thinking, well done, woman. Like, maybe we should all learn from this. And then the cab driver assumed that the woman that was all well put together and spoke so kindly and, seemed to be very responsible, she didn't end up paying. And then this other guy who looked a bit like a hoodlum, he was the one that completely threw so much appreciation and goodness and kindness to the cab driver. So we can't always tell what someone is going to be truly like. But I think that opening up our minds to not just as simple as like, you can't judge a book by its cover, but more than that, it's like I like the surprise factor. Like, it's not just that, it's probably better not to make judgments and assumptions. I know it's great if you listen to your intuition, and hopefully you can tap into that well enough to gauge whether someone is going to be kind or is going to, live up to what they owe or whatever it is. But on top of that, it's like the surprise factor when someone is completely not what you expected. It takes the whole, like, don't judge a book by its cover to a whole other level. I actually listened to a singer the other day on YouTube. I'll link his video in this as well. And I don't know I cannot describe to you what I thought his voice would sound like, but I would never have guessed that he sounded the way he does. He sounds like Frank Sinatra, but looks like he's, well, first of all, he's definitely a lot younger, and he just doesn't fit, like, his whole look does not register to most people that his voice would be that deep and that rich in maturity, and it just blew my mind. And I like these people and situations that show up in my life and in other people's lives to remind us that, to give us like reactions because we didn't expect something to happen the way it is. And today I didn't expect myself to laugh at this old woman that my past self would have just thought, how rude of her. I'm just curious, who has surprised you in your life? Who has turned out to be not what you expected? Have you had a reaction that you would normally not react that way and something different came out of you? What changed? Was it the circumstances? Was it the person? Was it your mood earlier in the day that made you react differently? What was it? And yeah, how do you think other people assume you're going to be like? I would love to know, if someone sees a picture of me or just sees me without me speaking or without me verbalizing anything, or like what their initial view, or what they assume from just looking at me without me opening up my mouth or saying anything. Or yeah, anyway, it was enlightening, to say the least. Talk to you soon.